Welcome to the Bookweaver's Quill. I'm Stephanie,
I'm Anna Marie.
And I'm Jackie.
and we're so excited to bring you this week's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about a very fun topic, something we've all experienced, and that is the topic of awkwardness.
Yeah.
So, Anna Marie, I'm going to pass this over to you. And
Okay. Yeah, Jackie, Steph, and I are absolutely thrilled to be with everybody today to share the whole thing about being awkward. And just prior to our recording, Steph and I had an interchange or an exchange that was awkward for the two of us. And she was trying to remember something, and I had said something she couldn't remember. And so awkwardness is something that we all experience every day in multiple ways. Uh, my my background right now to share today when we're all together is what do you do when you do feel awkward? I mean, how do you respond inside? Does your stomach get, all tight? Does your chest get tight? Do you try to look somewhere else? Do you laugh? Do you giggle? Do you get very silent? So there's some of the little things that we're going to touch upon. And what we're really going to invite everyone that gets a chance to see this is we really want you to respond. We really want you to reach out to us to let us know your awkward moments and how it's affected you. And so that's what we invite. That's the whole idea of podcasts that we're going to put out is we really want reader, listener feedback because we're all in this together. Another thing that we're going to do is we're all authors.
Mhm.
And so we're going to read excerpts of our books so that everyone can hear what we're doing. We're going to talk today about the awkwardness of creativity, like when you actually sit down to write certain things. And prior to our recording here, Steph certainly shared something that she just went through the other day when she was writing. And I write right now. Currently, I'm writing something for young adults, and there's a part of me that feels awkward, thinking, "Oh, are you too old to write something for young adults?" Even though I taught young adults forever and ever, but so we all go through those particular things. So, uh, Jackie, I'm going to ask you if, as an author, have you found any awkward moments for yourself when you are trying to write?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of authors in general have the idea of being an imposter. Kind of touching upon what you already just said about, am I too old to be writing this genre? If I'm writing a certain scene of a person that does not identify exactly with the person that I am, can I
Mhm.
identify enough to create a character that is believable and tangible and realistic enough that will touch people and that they will, be able to see themselves in that character if that's not actually me. Because we can't have, in a book, you could have anywhere from one to like normally like 20 something characters. And they can't all be carbon copies of this person.
Mhm.
And right now in the industry, a lot of times we're told that they don't want a story told from a perspective other than the author's perspective. So, how do you do that if you have multiple narrators, for example? Or how can you give a realistic rendition of life if you're supposed to be just using your own internal, personality? So, yeah, definitely a lot of awkwardness that can come. And a lot of times, just doing research, trying to find out how different perspectives think and different personalities work, and trying to put that onto paper can be kind of an awkward process.
Mhm. Mhm.
Definitely, yeah.
And have you read much of your things to other people? Have you done?
I've done a couple readings myself, but yeah, I'm definitely a big introvert. So just even being being here today is kind of, I know like right now it's just the three of us, but there could be other people later. I'm super nervous, totally have awkward vibes myself about that. So I tend to be one that will share my writing through letting it be read rather than
Mhm.
actually reading it to others.
Mhm.
Once again, awkward, right?
And Steph, what about you? Same type of
Yeah.
question.
I think for me, like if I focus a little bit more on the actual scene writing, because one of the things that I did was stepped out of my comfort zone and started writing romance, which I think um, has been a very interesting journey for me. And I also agree with Jackie because she's talking about writing these different perspectives. And one of the perspectives in my book is from a male perspective. So being able to do that and say, like, is this authentic enough? Or is this, how someone would react? And then having to run that by like my husband, for instance, and being like, now I'm reading this to him to see if this is, and it feels awkward sometimes.
Mhm.
But going back to scene writing, especially with jumping out of your comfort zone and taking on a different um, genre or a different type of writing, and when you do it, you feel like, am I going to be able to give people something that is um, something they want to read, something that isn't written because I will read and comb through Reddit, especially about romance and look at all the stuff that people don't like. And at the end of the day, I'm like, well, everybody doesn't like everything, it's so
Mhm.
hard, but so you feel awkward when you're writing some of those scenes and you're just like, does this sound weird? Like, is this going to get the point across the way I want it to? So I think it can be from that creative perspective very awkward sometimes when you're writing
Mhm.
just to create the scene that you want to create and feel like, is this good enough? Or is this going to, does this flow? Does this make
Mhm.
sense? So much to the point, especially with romance, that you have to visualize the scene in your head. Like, where would this person's hand be? Like, it's and it is an awkward experience, but at the same time, you don't want somebody visualizing it going, well, that's not possible, So, so that's been my experience lately, with that. So,
Good. Well, it is. It's very funny as a creative. And right now, for any of the people who are watching this video who are creatives, authors, and things like that, um, I'd like to share when I did one of my first readings, and I did it in a place up in Maine. I went to a writer's workshop for a week. It was up in Maine, and I read an excerpt from the material that I was working on then. And to stand there and read it and just have a number of women sitting there looking at me, I really couldn't hear what I was reading because my heart was beating so fast. And after I finished reading, I did get into what I was reading, but after I finished, there was this awkward silence that felt like it went on for a year. And I know it was only minutes, but within those minutes, I went through so many different emotions. The emotion of, oh, they think it's absolutely horrible. Oh my goodness, how can I disappear? And just thinking, and they were excellent authors. I mean, the things that they had read previously, they read some of their stuff. I was again in my head comparing what I was reading to what they had read. And so, like I said, in that awkward pause after I finished, the multiple emotions that I went through was torturous. And as
Mhm.
creatives, as authors, we do that to ourselves. So again, we want to hear from you. We want to hear you telling us what you've gone through and what you do with all of that. So, that's something that we would like to invite all of our listeners to do. Steph, were you going to say something
Yeah,
else?
I was gonna say, I would love to hear that because I have actually, I realize this now that you were talking about this, I've never read anything. And maybe it is because I'm also very much introverted when it comes to my writing. I've never read anything out loud where I have to read a passage and, where I'm doing it live. I've done it for recordings, but not live. So I would love to hear about how people react to that and if they react similarly to you, Anna Marie. And I think I'm gonna have to get out there and also push myself to do something like that just to
Mm-hmm.
feel it, just to feel the awkwardness.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It is a totally different feeling. Yeah, it really is. So if everyone's okay, I'm going to read an excerpt from, I'll start with Stephanie's book, since she's just talking to us about it. Steph, do you have yours right there in front of you?
I
The
do.
passages?
I do.
What would you
Oh,
think if we
oh.
throw you right in? What do you think?
All
You're
right.
going to do it right in front. And this is
Yeah.
not planned, everybody. This is not
Oh
planned.
boy.
This is,
My
I'm
cheeks are,
giving
if you
her,
can see my cheeks turning red, man,
I'm giving her an awkward moment right in our recording. So that might be really good stuff. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
You're first.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to read two short passages. The first passage is from Brody's perspective, who is one of my main characters, and then or sorry, it's from Lizzie's perspective, rather. And then the second little passage is from Brody's perspective.
And Steph, before you start to read, could I ask you the name of the book?
Sure. This is actually the old cover, so this is the character cover, but there's a new cover, but this is The Air of Light and Shadows. And it is a romantic fantasy suspense novel. So, okay. Should I go? See, you can see
Onward.
it. It's happening. It's real time. This is real time. Brody went to leave, but then he turned back to face Lizzie. You should know you're not the only old student in this class, he said. Was the only sound that escaped her. He thought she was old? I don't mean you're old, he retracted his statement quickly. I mean older, like not younger. What I mean is you're not in your 20s. I'm gonna stop talking now. You're not the only old student, really? Brody hadn't expected Lizzie to be so pretty. He hadn't expected anything, really, just thought she was some 30-something with a strange family history. It wasn't that he couldn't control himself around a pretty woman. He could. But he felt something stir within him the moment his eyes met hers, and he didn't like that. His breath had caught in his throat, his words barely escaped his lips, and then he completely insulted her. Awesome. A senior project? He couldn't think of anything better to say. The embarrassment was overwhelming. He had never in his life responded so poorly to a person, much less a woman. The end.
Did it.
I feel it was easier because it was in front of you too.
Well, we're thrilled that that's it. And so, Steph, what about those two scenes do you feel that demonstrates some awkwardness?
Sure. So Brody is this very handsome guy. He has no trouble with the ladies. He's talks well, speaks well, whatever. And here he is fumbling over this encounter with this woman, and he really doesn't understand it. He's like, why is this happening to me? And I think um her response is like, oh my gosh, like this guy is so awkward. He's like, why is he so awkward? But ultimately the point being that, and this is the message I really wanted to convey to people, is that everybody has awkward moments, that this idea of awkwardness um, is consistent through no matter who you are and no matter how great you think you are, no matter how popular you are or how famous you are, everybody has those awkward moments. It might be with a crush, it might be with your best friend, it might be with your husband or your partner or whoever it is, your kids, you know, yourself, but you have those moments and just it's something that brings us all together without actually us talking about it. We're talking about it now, which is great. And I think it can be helpful for people to understand that, this is a real life type of situation and that um, people people might feel alone a lot when they have these awkward moments and think, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed and I'm never going to live this down, or like this would only happen to me. This doesn't happen to other people, but it does. It very much does happen to other people. And it
Mhm.
happens to people like Brody who, are smooth talkers and they're fumbling over their words. Look at Jackie blushing right now.
He's fictitious,
Um,
Stephanie. He's fictitious.
the point is, everyone loves Brody, but the point is, um, that, this idea of awkwardness that we just experienced 2 seconds ago. All right, I'll get it together, guys. Um, it happens to everyone. That's the whole point. And I want people to walk away with knowing that. So,
Mm.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really very cool. And I think for myself, I know all three of us are avid readers, and we have been for a long time. And so those of you who are uh, popping in to listen to this recording, it's really amazing that when we read the identification that we can make with the different characters. And readers enrich their lives because we can identify both in, hey, I've experienced that, or I haven't experienced that, don't want to. But reading is very important. And I think that's one of the things that I've had the pleasure of knowing a lot of creative authors and knowing that they're very aware of what they are putting on their page. Very aware. So many, there are a couple of movies that are out about Beatrix Potter
Mm.
and the awkwardness that she experienced. She, of course, was an illustrator and a writer, and her family did not support her
mm,
because she was writing about rabbits.
mm,
She was writing about rabbits, and she was in high society, and her mom just didn't want to accept that her daughter was doing something like that. So the awkwardness that Beatrix went through, I don't know, one excerpt in the movie, and the movie's phenomenal. You see her holed up in her bedroom, and they show you a scene where the whole bedroom is just littered with crumpled up pieces of paper. Well, I find that I lived life symbolically. I found that to be so symbolic. First, from a creative perspective, knowing that when we do create things, and Jackie and Steph, I know you'll identify, when you do write something and you think, oh, it's no, it's just not what I was trying. And so you go to the next thing. Now, of course, in today's world, we're not usually crumpling up paper because
mhm,
we're usually creating on our computers, but inside we're crumpling things up. No, that's
mhm,
not going to work. For readers also, and for us in our everyday lives, isn't that kind of the same symbolic thing that we go through? We say something awkward in the office and everybody else is there and you hear it. And don't you kind of like crumble up
mhm,
inside? And like, how can you get out of that room quickly? Or another response that we have is we start to defend something.
mhm,
And when we're defending it, it really isn't something we want to defend, but we're already in that position. And so it gets so, we find ourselves tumbling over. So just like I said, as readers And we can identify with certain things. And as authors, it's something that we are acutely aware of. So, Jackie, do you
Yes.
have your stuff right in front of you?
I don't actually.
Don't you? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I can read some of Jackie's excerpts from her book that she felt demonstrated some awkwardness. And the name of Jackie's book is House of Unwound Thread, right, Jackie?
Right. That's right.
Okay. A sheen of sweat broke across my brow as the trail of coffins lurched forward. My palms were suddenly sweaty too, making it hard for me to grip the box I was meant to help carry. As its weight pressed down threateningly, I groped for the brass handle jutting from the box's side, but it curled through my fingers like smoke. I tottered, losing balance. One foot got snarled in the long gathers of my gown, and then the other. And suddenly the ground was gone, and all that was left was the cool rush of air and too many heartbeats. I winced, bracing myself for the fall, waiting for the coffin to collapse on top of me, imagining the nails pushing free and a charred body spilling out. As gravity overtook, another awful image blazed across my mind. All those tea lights showering down and setting my dress to flame. But instead, a hand extended up from behind me. It slipped into the coffin's handle, catching it just in time to keep the hefty crate from tipping. Then there was an arm, strong and steady, hooking around my waist. It pressed into the fleshy place below my ribs, preventing me from falling. I'm ever so sorry. I don't know what happened. The words broke off as I whirled around. The fog was profuse, but the young man's face was so close to mine, I could feel his breath on my cheek. He looked like an angel, gleaming and golden like a messenger of the gods. His features were deep and angular, from his chiseled cut jawbone to the great plunging cleft in his cheek. His hair was an unusual shade, shifting from dark to flaxen in the changing light, and his skin so fair he appeared carved from marble. Beneath thick, straight brows, his bottomless brown eyes brimmed with concern. I hadn't meant to alarm you, he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Carefully, he removed his hand from my wrist, but his touch remained on my skin, tickling and tumbling like the butterflies drumming to life in my stomach. I thought you might fall. I wanted to thank him, but all I managed to muffle was, oh, far more breath than word as he straightened his stance. A jutting Adam's apple drew the pale skin of his throat taut, and he took a step backwards. I gazed up, suddenly noticing how tall he was. So tall, the tea lights crowning the coffin reflected in his eyes, filling the brown with specks of gold that burnt like embers. There was something hypnotizing about his eyes, so mysterious and profound, like deep, dark wells. Wells, he whispered, as if extracting the word from my mind. He floated out like a daydream, his voice so smoky it nearly dissipated into the fog. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. It felt like he had untethered me by the seams, pulling the two sides apart just enough to peek inside, right down into my deepest thoughts.
Thank you.
Whoa, awkward.
Definitely awkward. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us about that, Jackie.
So, my inspiration was kind of similar to what you said when you were talking about being in front of the group of people and speaking to them and putting yourself out there and then having that silence. And
Mhm.
so in this awkward moment, which ends up being like a threefold awkwardness for my main character, um, it starts out with somebody looking at her the wrong way and her interpreting that silence as
Mhm.
something wrong, and the palms going slick, and then because of that then she trips, and then the next thing happens, and like super awkward progression. And so each time it's kind of like looking at the way we interpret our own awkwardness. Like sometimes I think that other people don't even realize it, but we're so in the moment that we will go ahead and not only drop the coffin, but trip in our dress and fall in the dirt and do the whole rest of it because we are in our minds. And it's kind of like a reflection of that. And like Stephanie said, I think it happens to all of us, not just you know, the dorky girl like that is always portrayed in the movies as the one that would be awkward and trip and fall and stuff. It could be your hero, you know, the hot
Mhm.
guy that's supposed to, you know, have no type of issues with his self-esteem, etc. So that was the first part, was all the different ideas that are going through her head, like why did that person look at me, and then she's nervous, and then one thing provokes the next, and then once again the same thing happens once she turns around and the guy that helped her, well, he's not so bad looking. So
Mhm.
now she's double awkward. She starts like, oh, that out, and then she loses her words and doesn't even know how to speak. And I think no, this is a young adult book, young adult, new
Mhm.
adult. And I think that a lot of it stems from just like, you know, personal awkward
Right,
awkwardness
right.
as a teenager, the things that I went through myself. Just I mean, high school's awkward. Middle school's really awkward, I think. I still remember those days quite vividly, which I draw a lot of my material from. So yeah, it was just looking at the different ways that the when we're feeling our awkward moments, how it actually kind of feels. I think that that was my inspiration, kind of
Mhm.
portraying and seeing how many people reading that would be like, oh my God, yeah, I remember feeling just like that. Maybe not having the coffin in their hands, you know, that's another part of the story. But yeah,
But don't we feel like we're dying inside sometimes when there is
yeah,
an awkwardness?
right.
So,
Letting your mind get, you know, get carried
excuse
away
me.
with you, like her, that the coffin's going to fall and all the tea lights are going to fall down and everything's going to catch on fire. And meanwhile, like none of it's really going to happen. And we do go through those kinds of that mind process when we are in either a panicked or an awkward situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And as a listener, Steph,
Mhm.
when you listened to the excerpt from Jackie's book, what emotions were elicited within you?
Well, I was just so I love Jackie's writing, and I've had the privilege of reading this book, so I'm very thankful to have been able to read it, and she knows how much I praise her work. Um,
Thanks.
but so I was coming at it from having read it before and just sort of sitting with the scene and being able to envision it, like have it come to life for me through that reading. And I could really see her going through each step of that awkward encounter and just like little like nuggets of great writing, just like his hand reaching the fleshy part under her ribs, that kind of thing. I'm very much a visual person, so and then her and just visualizing her, having this awkward response to him, but also having those awkward thoughts. I actually appreciate Jackie, you talking about how most it really was just like in her head, because as a reader, you're sort of experiencing everything as the character, but you forget that sometimes like the character is experiencing this stuff internally, and just
Mm,
that image of it was really powerful for me because I'm like, oh yeah, like the idea that what's going on outside her, like people don't know, like Wells even, I would say, doesn't know what is going on in her head, like
Mhm.
just that realization was really powerful for me. So yeah, so I just really enjoyed looking at it from that perspective.
oh, that's great. Yeah, it really is. And thinking about, again, the scenes that, excuse me, the scenes that the both of you just shared with us. I think about Jane Austen and her writing. And there are so many in Pride and Prejudice and some of her other books. There are phenomenal examples of awkwardness, of what it's like to grow up in a society that she was growing up in. And how do you conform or be nonconformist? And were
Right.
nonconformists allowed? Excuse me. So, again, literature reading offers so many opportunities for us to get to know the interior part of ourselves. And this is probably going to sound like a commercial right here to those that are, sharing this with us right now. But I'm such a big proponent of reading versus just the visual movies and things like that. I mean, our society today is so quick, everything's kind of handed to us, in a certain format. And taking the time to sit and read gives us that particular pause within ourselves so that we are connected to something, again, that we can identify with. And it helps to mold, shape our character. It gives us a very private time to look at something and have that internal dialogue within ourselves. And so that's why I'm such a big proponent of reading versus just watching movies and things along that line. I'm going to piggyback something that Jackie said just a minute ago, uh, saying that middle school and high school are such awkward periods of time. And I'm going to read something very, very short because the book that I'm working on currently, and it's called Only When She Reads, is about a young lady and her relationship with her mom. And what I'm going to read right now is that she's in middle school and the conversation that she has with her best friend. And one of the things I happen to have taught middle school, I loved every blessed minute of it. And the reason I loved it so much was because of the awkwardness. I just loved when you'd walk into a classroom and your students would just go, and you'd say certain things that they just weren't engaged. They just weren't. And it's just because it's an awkward period of time when they're getting to know themselves. So I'm just going to read just a real short excerpt. And again, this is when the two young ladies are talking to each other. And it's based on how opposites can attract. What Ruthie is doing is she's talking to her friend Jackie um, about her mom's relationship with this new person. Did you ever hear the saying that opposites attract? Jackie takes a sip of her Slurpee before she answers me. Yeah, I've heard people say it, but I never think about stuff like that. Now, ask me about Prince's new tour schedule, and I can help you out there. I threw my shawl towards the music magazine Jackie was holding. You obviously have a limited ability to understand anything that doesn't concern you. Honestly, you're so self-centered anymore. Jackie ignored my outburst, so I made sure to step on the pile of magazines that she had scattered over my bedroom floor as I walked to the window. The street was empty, as always. I'd do anything to live in the middle of New York City. At least there, when I'd look out my window, I'd see people and activity. Here all I see are green lawns that are watered by underground sprinkler systems. It's like all of us who live out here are like on little timers. We wake up at a certain time, we eat at a certain time, we go to the pool at a certain time, on and on. Ruthie, listen to this, Jackie shouts. And so I'm going to stop there. So what does she say? We have two young girls who are not thrilled about the environment in which they're in. And they both feel awkward about how do you really express that in your own life. So, and it goes on. So, having read that and having shared with everyone, again, would love all of our listeners to please reach out to us. Steph will give you the logistics of how to do that, but reach out to us about your awkward moments. And we also want to invite you to our future podcast about being a creative, being in the everyday life in today's hectic society, and the different emotions that we all go through and what those emotions elicit from us, both in our becoming more confident or knocking our confidence. And that's what we want to do. So thank you for joining us today for Once Upon a Trope. And Steph, would you tell everybody how to go ahead and get in contact with us?
Sure. Of course, they can always leave a comment below, but if they wanted to share a story, they can email us, and I will leave that information in the explanation box below as well. Yeah, send us your stories, and we will respond to you. And we hope that you'll join us for the next podcast because we have lots to share.
And I'm
And
just
if you
going
like
to,
this,
yeah.
don't forget to hit the like button, right?
Sure. Yeah, don't forget to hit
Excellent,
the like
Jackie.
button. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And don't feel awkward to tell us if you saw something during this particular recording, that we can improve on. Because guess what? This was our first one. And talk about feeling awkward. All right. Talk to you all later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
All
guys.
right. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you next time.
On the Bookweaver's Quill.
Bye. Welcome to the Bookweaver's Quill. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Anna Marie. She didn't forget her name. To the
1, 2, 3. Welcome
Welcome
to
to
the
the
Bookweaver's
Bookweaver's
Quill.
Quill.
Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3.
Welcome to the
To the
book.
Bookweaver's Quill.
Right.
Welcome to the Bookweaver's Quill. Bibbidi.
Bobbity.
Books.
I like it.